Welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68. I'm Christian Sykes. We got Joey Blackwell and Charles Branch, and we're joined by another special guest, Bryan Passink, who is a former Alabama basketball player, scholarship Alabama basketball player, and now the color analyst for the Crimson Tide Sports Network for men's basketball. Bryan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, guys. Appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, we're so happy you could join us, especially the week of the SEC tournament. I know you guys are going to be super busy up in Nashville. Um, Speaking of that, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. Alabama sees itself as a 3 seed in the SEC tournament, obviously a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Can you talk a little bit about the coaching job that Nate Oates has done this year, which I think on this podcast we've said that it's been Nate's best job coaching at Alabama so far?
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's saying something because he's been not just one of the best coaches in the SEC since he's been at Alabama, but in college basketball. And when you look at what he was able to do a year ago and all that was lost, and it's well documented. I mean, you lose a guy in Brandon Miller that I think is the best player in school history, another first rounder in Noah Clowney. You know, you lose other guys that were key players, starters to transfer. Charles Bediako leaves. And then, oh, by the way, you're all alone in the office because all three of your head coaches or all three of your assistant coaches get head coaching jobs, which I don't think has ever happened in Division I college basketball. So for this year to be what it has been is just incredible. And I think if it wasn't that the media and the experts got South Carolina so wrong with and listen, they were really good, but to be picked 14th and then to be one game out of the lead, you understand why Lamont Paris got SEC Coach of the Year. But I think Nate Oates, the job he did was every bit as good when you consider what was lost on the court and off. It's just amazing that he's been able to assemble the roster that we have, the coaching staff that we have, and essentially with a brand new team and brand new staff, haven't missed a beat. Going to be a 4 seed, 3 or 4 seed, depending on what goes on in the SEC tournament this coming week in Nashville. But Nate Oates has solidified himself, in my opinion, is one of the best coaches in college basketball year in and year out, because I thought, especially once the staff left and all those guys got head coaching jobs, and then you look at the roster, and just in today's college basketball, you have to recruit the portal and recruit your roster. And with all that was left, and then for Nate to be a one-man band over the almost the entire summer, to be able to retain the players he did, to go out in the portal. You had the high school class coming in that was another top 10 class. Even with all that being said, I thought that this was going to be a rebuilding year. Didn't lose. I wasn't losing faith in the program and where we are. It's just the nature of college basketball that this was probably going to be a year that there might be some bumps in the road. And for this team to do what they've done and to be where they are and have a chance to win its third SEC regular season title in 4 years, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But to be right there throughout the entire season and be sitting where we are going into Nashville with looking at a great seed, not only in the SEC tournament, but in the national tournament coming up, is just an incredible job. And we all know, I mean, you guys do a great job and follow it as well as anybody, and and have an appreciation for what Nate Oates has done. But now the college basketball world is seeing it, and they've seen it year after year after year. But I agree, this year is the best coaching job he's done, and that's saying a lot because he's been one of the best in the country.
Absolutely. And then talking about Nate Oates and his coaching, obviously a former student athlete at the university, shot, what did you say, Charles? 39%?
39% from three.
39% from three at your during your time at Alabama. Can you talk about, if you were a college basketball player in 2024, obviously going through recruiting, Can you talk about maybe your level of excitement or want to play for Nate Oates in the system that he runs?
Well, I would have loved to play for him, except the only problem is that he probably would have found somebody better than me because his style of play is awesome, and every player would want to play it. But his recruiting is elite, so he probably would have upgraded the talent. But if I would have had a chance to actually play for him, it would have been, that's what every player dreams of. And I've talked to so many of my former teammates and guys that even that I didn't play with that I talked to at reunions and different things, and they all say the same thing. They're excited about the program and the success, and that's the main thing. But we all kind of get off to the side and say, "Man, boy, sure would have been nice to get yelled at for not shooting threes." That wasn't the case with some of the guys I played with. I played for Wimp Sanderson and David Hobbs, and those guys were, great in their own way. But if you missed a couple threes, you were coming out. And with Nate, if you don't take a couple threes, you're coming out. So different mindset. But I can tell you the old guys like me and some of my teammates, they're jealous of what these guys are getting to play, or the style of play that they get to play each and every time out on the court. But the thing is, and I've seen this from the time they got to Tuscaloosa to now, that every guy wants to play this way. And then you get to campus over the summer and you start practicing and you see what it takes to be one of the fastest teams in the country and play at this pace. And I think the first summer, I'm watching guys who are really good players and really athletic and in great shape, and they're over there by the trash can because you have to get in ridiculous shape to play this way. And to play this way and play well and make good decisions. And I think that's one of the reasons he wants to challenge his teams in the non-conference to get ready for the rugged SEC is you're bringing in so many new guys each and every year, and nobody's really used to playing this way. I mean, people talk about playing fast and playing this way. Very few programs actually do it. So there's an adjustment period, and I thought there was an adjustment period for this team. But when you look at recruiting and some of the players that Alabama's been able to beat the blue bloods of college basketball on, it's because of the style of play. Everybody wants to play this way, the winning. And to me, the underrated part of this program that I don't think people talk enough about, but you hear it with the NBA guys, is the player development. And to me, that is something that really separates Alabama. When you look at guys coming in the offseason to develop over the course of a year or over the course of their career, they get better in this system. And he's recruiting players that have dreams of playing in the NBA. And he can show you, here's the path. Here's what certain guys have been able to do from the time they stepped on campus to the time they left. And their development is off the charts. And when you look at his staff, to get the guys that he's been able to bring in, there is such a focus on player development, and it is from guys like Preston Murphy and Ryan Pannone and Austin Clonch, but the graduate assistants and other guys that are involved in the program that maybe you don't know their names, those guys are heavily involved in player development. And to me, that's one of the areas of this program that goes a little bit unrecognized, but it is such a key to their success. And it's one of the reasons I'm optimistic on what this team could do in the postseason, because his teams get better. Now they've had injuries and haven't played as well lately, but the development from the start of the season to the end of the season, from a personnel standpoint, has been off the charts since Nate Oates has been here. And I think we're going to see that as we get into the SEC and NCAA tournament.
And this is a perfect segue. Obviously, Nate Oates says that he wants his teams peaking in March. Obviously, last couple of weeks with Reitzel being out, and then most recently Ryland being out, there's been sort of a slump, if you will. Alabama's moved from the third most efficient offense to the second most efficient offense in college basketball, still like 126, I think, in offensive efficiency. Where do you see Alabama projecting as far as a SEC tournament, NCAA tournament run? Obviously, there's only been one time in Alabama's history where they've gotten past the Sweet 16. Nate Oates has gotten to the Sweet 16 twice and eventually ran into the UCLA team and obviously San Diego State. How do you see Alabama maybe shaping up and faring in postseason play this year?
Well, I thought that the Arkansas win was big for a lot of reasons, but maybe most importantly is getting the double bye. And this team, to me, needs rest and to get healthy. And by having the extra day off, I think you can accomplish both of those things. And Latrell Wrightsell, we've seen, and you guys know the value that he has on this team. His efficiency numbers are off the charts, and the way he was playing before he went down with the head injury it wasn't Mark Sears level, it wasn't first team All SEC level, but it was right there. He was a critical part of this team with the way he was shooting the ball, number one in the SEC in 3-point percentage. He's a really smart ball handler and makes good decisions, takes care of it, and an underrated on-ball defender. He was starting to really get into a groove, get used to the system, and was playing the best basketball of his career. And it was great to see him play so well against Arkansas. He was a difference maker, and we saw how important he is to this team and how much he's been missed over the last several weeks. And now to have Rylan Griffin out, the good news is it's not serious. Hopefully he'll be back Friday against probably Florida. Maybe, the Georgia-Missouri winner will play Florida, and then Alabama will have a tough game on Friday night. But this team needs to get healthy. Rylan Griffin and Latrell Wrightsell may be, I think, its best two perimeter defenders and spot-up shooters. Those guys can do it on both ends of the floor. But for Alabama to make a run, they're getting some rest right now. Because of the injuries, you've had several guys maybe play more minutes late in the season than probably Nate Oates would have liked them to. But out of necessity, you're chasing a championship. So you understand why guys are playing extended minutes. But I think the almost week off will really help this team. Getting Rylan Griffin back, obviously, is important. But with Latrell Wrightsell back, a healthy Rylan Griffin, and a rested team, this team can make a run. Absolutely. I mean, Nate Oates doesn't lose in Nashville. He hasn't. Whether it's been the SEC tournament or playing Vanderbilt. That hasn't been the case for many Alabama coaches before him. So Nashville has been a great place for Alabama basketball under Nate Oates, and I'm hopeful that can continue. But when you look out past that to the NCAA tournament, this team has what it takes. I mean, they've got one of the best point guards in the country, I think, an All-American, and Mark Sears. We saw today that he was first team All-SEC, and I thought that was well-deserved. And Aaron Estrada, veteran, Rylan, Latrell, those guys on the perimeter. And I think Grant Nelson, if he can stay out of foul trouble, is someone who has shown toughness. He's shown the knack to hit big shots. His three-point percentage isn't what he would like or we would all like, but man, the guy is tough physically, mentally, steps up, and with the game on the line, he's making tough plays and big shots. And I think a week off will help him and just get in the film room, get off his legs. And I know the focus with Grant is to stay out of foul trouble. He's so important to this team. He needs to be on the floor. And then you have some freshmen that are starting to really feel more comfortable and more confident. Sam Walters hits shots. Jaron Stevenson is getting better and better and showing more toughness. And also Nick Pringle. I thought the way he's played in recent weeks it gives this team what they lacked in the non-conference, and that is someone on the low block, a rim protector, a guy that can rebound and play tough. He's started to figure out that balance of playing really hard, really tough, really aggressive, but doing it without fouling. And wasn't able to do that throughout most of the season. He's starting to do that now, and he's playing the best basketball of his career. So I'm excited about the NCAA tournament. It's great to you're in, you're playing for seeding. Can't wait for this week in Nashville. Hopefully, Alabama can have a long run in the SEC tournament and then the NCAAs. With the way this team was playing before the injuries hit and before maybe a little fatigue set in, I think they can make a very deep run. Obviously, they have to get better on the defensive end. I think fresh legs will help in that regard. And if they're guarding and feeling good on the offensive end, which I expect that to be the case, this could be a fun March Madness for Alabama fans.
Yeah, and we told Chris this last week, but we have a term for Nate in Nashville, and it's called Nashville Nate, because he's 10-0 in Nashville versus Vandy in the NCAA or SEC tournament. Because the only time he's lost in the SEC tournament is when the tournament was in Tampa. So, and obviously didn't get it the COVID year, but we call him Nashville Nate around these parts.
I love it. I love it. I hope that continues.
Joey, I think you had some questions for Brian.
Yeah, just one. As Christian just said, we had Chris Stewart on here last week, and he kind of mentioned, and any Alabama fan that watches the courtside cams, with you and Chris, every time Bama scores, doesn't matter what type of score it is, there's a fist bump between you two. And I was wondering, how long have y'all been doing that? Courtside cam's a recent thing, relatively. So I was wondering how long have y'all been doing that? When did that start? And if there was more of a story behind that.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I had no idea we were doing it, and I've learned a lot about myself and and how I look during the broadcast. I had no idea that I was flailing my hands and high fiving and fist bumping, and it's funny to watch. And I thought when I heard they were doing it, and this, I guess we've been doing it a couple of years now. I saw them setting up the camera. I'm like, who in the world would want to watch this? This is ridiculous. And I'll tell you this, like the numbers of people, especially the highlight clips, like they're crazy high numbers of people watching this. And I kind of understand why, because Chris is the best. Like he's there's nobody better. Basketball, football, Chris is the best in the business. And I look like an idiot because I'm trying not to talk over Chris. That's like my number one goal as a color analyst, is to not talk over Chris. That'll get me in trouble. Because and listen, I mean, it'll get me in trouble with fans. Like they don't want to hear me, yelling and screaming over Chris. They want to hear the call. And so I'm trying to be quiet. And so what's happened is, in my effort to be quiet, I'm, pumping my fist and banging, like, on bad plays, I'm banging the desk, and I'm hitting the cough mute button and yelling at the officials, like, you can't hear this. But I'm acting like a fool. And then when I go back and watch it, I'm like, my gosh, have I been doing this the whole time? And apparently I have. And I wish we had the court cam. There's been a couple of games that obviously you guys will remember when I think it was the SEC tournament in Nashville, the COVID year. And you got 20-something% full arena. We're literally like the ceiling at Bridgestone Arena. Like like if I stood up, I would hit the ceiling. We're so far away. And that last play where we get a stop late, LSU has a couple of looks at it. They miss a point blank look. We win the championship. Chris, if you ever heard the call, it's an incredible call. Well, what you don't know and didn't see, unfortunately, because we didn't have the court cam then, is I tackled Chris, and we're laying on the floor, and he's called like, and I'm not speaking because I don't want to talk over the call, but I'm just so ecstatic and happy, and I'm tackling him, and he's like, we're on the ground, and we just won the championship. And it's funny, I think back, when they played a call sometimes, great moments in Alabama basketball history. And that's what the calls. And so just appreciate it next time that Chris Stewart was playing through serious contact on that call, that championship call. But Chris is one of my best friends. We have a great time together. And I've had more people laugh at me, laugh with me about that court cam, but it's definitely funny to go back and watch, especially after big wins.
That's awesome. And as a frequent watcher of the courtside cam, I just also want to extend some kudos to you for being the only member of the broadcast team to wear crimson at the Crimson Out this past weekend. What was that about?
Thank you for noticing, and I gave them trouble. We'll just call it that. I'm like, man, what are y'all doing? I mean, how does 14,000 people hear about this, but nobody on the broadcast crew besides me knew? And they didn't do the whiteout. I don't know, man. I guess I gotta tell these people what's going on. But no, I gave them trouble, so don't worry.
Oh, it's good. That's good. Charles, I'll pass it to you.
I just want to mention real fast. It's so interesting that you mentioned that you don't try to talk over him, because when I watch the courtside cam, I can literally see like you're trying to not say something, and so you're like holding back, like you're like,
yeah, it's hard, and in the Chris and I've we've been together on the broadcast. This is our 21st year together, and so I know when he's going to take a breath, which is what I'm looking for. And Chris doesn't take a lot of breaths. I don't know if you know, he can talk. But I'm waiting. And so, and I just like, I know how it sounds when he's like, what Chris has to say, you have to hear. He's calling the what. And then when he's taking a break, or after that, then I'm trying to get in and say a why. And so I'm trying to not talk over him, especially, and let me tell you, like, it's so hard on big moments because, and you guys know, and if you watch the court cam, you can tell, like, Chris is a professional broadcaster. I'm a former player, but I'm a fan, and Chris is too. But he's able to, like, and that's why everybody loves Chris, because he is such a good broadcaster. He's so professional, but he loves the Tide, and I got to love the Tide part, but not all the professional broadcasting. And so, if I can do one thing, it's to just shut my mouth. So that's what I try to do.
Well, that is interesting. A question I asked Chris last week, as far as officiating goes. I mean, we never have bad calls against us. I get that. But those rare occasions where one does go against us, who's got to keep who in control? Do you have to keep Chris control? Does he have to keep you under control? Or do y'all both have to keep Tom Stipe under control on the floor?
Well, it's funny. So we kind of police each other, and I'll just say it this way, not to name names. There are other broadcasts, we'll say, out there in the sports college world that really harps on poor calls. And so if there's a bad call, that's a story, that's part of the game. But we try not to harp on it. We try to remind ourselves we don't want to sound like that in that particular broadcast. So that's something that maybe I'll bring up. And I'll tell you this, I have some good friends that are officials. I know it's kind of like, how, like, knowing your limitations on things is just an important part of life. So I have certain feelings towards officials that it's probably best that I just don't talk about it, because I want to say things that would probably get me fired. And so what I try to do is, again, like when Chris is talking, I try to not say what I think, and I try to not talk about, I mean, I don't do a very good job, but the officiating upsets me sometimes. And so I try to not say what I think. And I'll just try to describe it as, and Nate Oates is really upset with that call. That Mark Sears didn't feel like he fouled him. He's talking to the official. So I think complaining about officiating comes across as whining on the radio. I think it's different on TV because you can see it. But we're homers. We're Alabama fans, but I hope we don't complain about the officiating too much, because I at least don't think that sounds very good.
Yeah, I'll say it on the behalf of Alabama fans. We appreciate y'all not being the Auburn radio broadcast. With that, we'll get to last year the NCAA tournament finally comes back to Birmingham. Alabama has a great season, deserves playing in Birmingham. Auburn gets very lucky to be able to play in Birmingham. Even with that, it was a great moment, I thought, for the state of Alabama as it relates to basketball, just to showcase the fandom for both teams and the interest with that. But I remember the SEC tournament used to also be in Birmingham when you were playing. So not only you had Alabama at Auburn, but you had Pitino at Kentucky, Richardson at Arkansas, Dale Brown at LSU, and there's probably some other coaches that I'm forgetting as well. But just can you paint the picture of what the SEC tournament used to be like when it was in Birmingham and just that particular weekend?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was awesome. And my freshman year, it was in Birmingham, and we ended up. Remember, you guys probably remember the game. You're too young to remember it live, but probably know of the game. It was the Alabama Arkansas semifinal, and there were NBA players all over the place. I mean, we had Hollywood Robinson, Latrell Sprewell, Robert Ory. They had Todd Day, Lee Mayberry, Oliver Miller, and it was just back and forth and back and forth. And Elliot Washington hit the three, essentially at the buzzer to beat Arkansas. And the electricity in the building, it was Arkansas's first year in the SEC. They were really good. I mean, they had just gone to a Final Four, and they ended up a couple of years later winning it all in '94, going to the championship game in '95. So Arkansas was at its peak. Alabama was at its peak. We had won 3 straight SEC tournament championships, was going for a 4th. It was Kentucky's first year. That was Kentucky's first year back in the SEC tournament in that '92 tournament. They were on probation. Pitino got there. They weren't even in Nashville the year before because of probation. And they had Jamal Mashburn and that group that lost to Duke and Christian Laettner in that epic game a few weeks later. But we ended up losing to Kentucky in the SEC championship game. But that weekend in Birmingham was just like, it's one of the great memories, one of the great sports memories I've ever had. And it was, we were staying downtown at the Sheridan, and we would, after the games, walk back to the hotel because traffic, and I mean, you're literally connected to the BJCC. And after that game against Arkansas, when Elliott hit the buzzer beater, I mean, it took us like an hour just because of the massive humanity of Alabama fans and I mean, it was like the coolest thing. And so that it was awesome. And you got to feel of that last year with the NCAA tournament. And listen, I wish, I would love for it to come back to Birmingham. I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. It's not quite, I don't know if it's quite big enough. But anyway, if they ask me, yes, let's do it. But I love it in Nashville. I love it at Bridgestone Arena. It's so special. The success we've had recently doesn't hurt. But I can't wait to get to Nashville. It's other than Birmingham. And if they wanted to play it in Tuscaloosa, I'd be fine with that too. But other than that, Nashville is to me the best. And I can't wait to get there. And now with the level of play in the SEC and so many teams that their fan bases know that they can make a run, not just in Nashville, but the NCAA tournament, it just kind of ramps everything up. And the excitement level is going to be off the charts this week. The SEC tournament is always one of my favorite weeks of the year. I mean, I think I enjoy it more than the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament is the best, but I just think just from a fun standpoint, like the NCAA tournament, I'm so nervous, I don't even know that I can enjoy it. Like I do enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but the SEC tournament and being in downtown Nashville and the bars and restaurants and fans of all 14 schools, man, it's just really cool.
We started off talking about Arkansas from this past weekend. I'll kind of bookend it with this, talking about that 94 Arkansas team that did win the national championship. Your team in 94 in Tuscaloosa, when they were number one, also gave them one of their losses that year, 66-64. You also got to play with a lot of really good players at Alabama. Think of Antonio McDyess, Roy Rogers, James Robinson, Eric Washington. I guess my first question is, what do you remember about that game specifically beating Arkansas? And two, I have gotten to see the Arkansas-Alabama game from the SEC tournament on YouTube. How do we get more of that? Do you have the VHS tape? Does somebody else? How do we get those games from the 90s on YouTube so we can relive some of those moments, but just some of those great Alabama basketball players?
All right. Well, I think I can track them down. I may have some. We in the off season, let's talk and let's make that happen, because I think Alabama fans would enjoy all those games because they were incredible. But that 94 game, that was that was a special game. Obviously, you don't have an opportunity to host number one very often, and to do that, and it be Alabama, Arkansas, which, Wimp Sanderson, or Wimp had left at that point, but early when they got in the league, Wimp Sanderson, Nolan Richardson, 40 Minutes of Hell, Plaid Palace, so awesome. So this was a few years later, but so that was one of the early SEC games, and we were struggling. Like, we had gone to the tournament. There was the Charleston Classic, and lost to a couple of average mid-majors, and we were going nowhere. And Antonio McDyess, who was our best player, left and went back to Quitman, Mississippi. Like, he was like I don't know if he officially quit, but he was just tired. He went home. And I don't know that he may have missed a day of practice, but he left. Like, we're looking around, we're about to play number one team in the nation. McDyess had gone home in frustration with the coaches, whatever. I don't remember the situation. And one of our assistants drove to Quitman, Mississippi. And from what I was told, Hobbs said, go to Quitman and don't come back without him. And brought Antonio back. And that seemed to work out. We beat Arkansas, ended up turning our season around and getting to the NCAA tournament, which in the non-conference, we were around 500 with a weak strength of schedule. So that was a huge game for so many reasons. But the Arkansas teams, and then I think it was a year later, or it may have been, it was either that year or the year after. I think it was actually 95, which was my senior year. We went to Fayetteville, and we were the first team to ever win at Bud Walton. And they were the defending champs and ended up going and losing to UCLA in the national championship game. So several special memories against Arkansas from my time.
Yeah, we gotta find those games and give them out to the Alabama people again somehow.
All right, we can work together. I know people. I know people with tapes, so we can get that done, I think.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I don't think we have anything else. I really appreciate your time. Obviously, I know with the SEC tournament coming up, prepping for all of that, and then obviously the NCAA tournament, time is valuable right now. So we really appreciate you jumping on after the watching the Sanford Bulldogs clinch their spot in the NCAA tournament. Hopefully, we don't have to face Bucky, because I don't want to face that team.
Yeah, I feel like that may be the case, but hey, that would be a fun game to watch. That's for sure.
Well, hopefully it's Auburn. I'm just saying. Hopefully we get to see Auburn and Bucky play each other. So
I'll vote for that. I think that's a great idea.
Well, I again appreciate you. Hopefully they don't send you to Spokane, which is what we talked about prior to the podcast, because that's probably going to happen. But
well, hey, listen, I'll say this. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and all the years that my the question was, would we host an NIT game or would we go on the road? Man, you can send me to Spokane, Washington all day long in the NCAA tournament, and I'll be excited. I love where we are. These are the glory days of Alabama basketball. And listen, I think it's just the beginning of what Nate Oates is beginning to build here. It's been awesome, and I see nothing but that continuing, and even having a chance to do some things that have never been done in this program. So couldn't be more excited. And listen, I appreciate you guys having me. And I've had a chance to listen to several of your podcasts. Y'all do a great job, and I'm a fan of the podcast. So it's a pleasure to be on with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll definitely get you back on. Tell the folks where they can go and follow you. I guarantee you any person that's listening to this already follows you, and go ahead and give yourself a shout out on where they can follow you on the social media.
Well, I guess, I mean, the only one I can remember my name on is Twitter. So, and that's easy. At Bryan Passink with a Y. So, and I think I'm on Instagram, but I don't even know. I don't even look at Instagram. That's just I'm that's just to stalk my daughters and make sure they don't post anything they shouldn't.
Smart.
All right. Well, Brian, we appreciate you, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
All right, guys. Appreciate y'all having me.
Thanks, Brian. Roll Tide.
We just want to thank Brian for taking the time out of his day to talk to us about Alabama basketball and, his memories that he has, especially calling the games like he has for 20 plus years. But let's dive into the kind of results from the over the weekend. Obviously, Alabama beats Arkansas, which I think was a much closer game than I think anyone had kind of expected. Alabama had to come back down 6 with 1:10 left. Reitzel hits a huge three. Grant hits a huge three. And for whatever reason, Eric Musselman decides that he's not going to take one of his 2 timeouts that he has in the final 30 seconds or 15 seconds, how much time was left to set up a play for success for whatever reason. But we really appreciate him for coming up short like he tends to do against Alabama. But Joey, Charles, you guys want to talk about your thoughts on that game? I think I've addressed most of mine on the post-game speech, which you guys obviously weren't able to attend.
Obviously, that sounds like it was a little bit of a dig there. We kind of left you hanging out there.
I'm sorry. I had to talk to myself and Bryant for 30 minutes while I was trying to, and you guys already know I don't like to talk that much. So
we know as far as the game goes, I will say I didn't get to watch the second half or overtime. But I did listen to it. I'm just saying I wasn't able to watch it, but obviously not the result that we would have. I mean, obviously we got the win, so that's the result we wanted to see. But as far as the method to get to that W, not exactly what most of us, predicted. But that being said, I thought it was a game that really showed it's with all the diversity this team has had the past couple of weeks with injuries and other issues. I really liked the fight that this team showed, because obviously down in the first half, things weren't going their way. I think they had 8 turnovers in that first half, but then they're able to bounce back, limited it to only 3 turnovers in the second half, and then no turnovers in overtime at a point where, quite often you see teams that are able to fight back once it hits overtime. There's a little bit of a collapse, and Alabama wasn't able to do that. They were really able to build off of that momentum that they had already carried through the second half. So really like to see that. Not the best shooting day. Obviously, they shot 44%, but really from 3, only 9 of 30, which is not, once again, not terrible, but for Alabama standards, you really like to see improvement there. The free throw line, 17 of 25. It's kind of the argument that I always make with, going back to the UCLA game in the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. You hit one of those free throws, there is no overtime. The game's over. So you really got to put a stress on that heading into this week. Overall, as far as individual performances, Sears got his 22. I see if I like to say that every week. And I know, Christian, you said before that that's something we shouldn't take for granted, and it really isn't. Sears is just, while he didn't have his best night from beyond the arc, he still had a really solid night. Grant Nelson, of course, even though with his 4 fouls, he still had a double-double with 14 points, 13 rebounds. He was huge in that game and a really big impact. Nick Pringle, I know Bryan Passink just talked about Nick Pringle and what he's been able to do. But really, when you take a look at his double-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, he's also really come about. And as far as another accolade, Sam Walters with his 10 points, it was really good. I mean, we all saw Nate, getting overjoyed when when Walters in the final minutes finally hit that three and was finally getting, I think he hit a free throw as well that really kind of started that. So all of those are building blocks that you really like to see. Even if it was a close game, you like to see those building blocks kind of starting to lay a foundation for the SEC tournament coming up this week and March Madness the next. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I liked what I saw from this team in that second half and in that overtime period compared to what we had seen in the past couple of weeks when they've been, having some issues.
Yeah, I mean, you got to praise the fight for the team. Down 6 with 2 minutes left, down 15 in the first half. I was frustrated, as I'm sure many Alabama fans were frustrated with the first half performance. And some of the things that were being said on the broadcast, I think it was by Jimmy Dykes, as far as Coach Oates talking about where is this team's head going to be without a chance to win the SEC regular season championship. And look, it was a very, obviously it's a long season and you put a lot into it, and you just come up short against Tennessee in an incredible home game environment. You go down to Florida. You don't play well there. Griffin gets hurt. Wrightsell comes back, but doesn't really play a whole lot of minutes. So you can understand the team kind of being reeling a little bit and being worn down. But it was a game from the very start that you had an opportunity to secure a double bye in the SEC tournament, which I think, as we all know, and Brian just talked about too, this team needs to get healthy and needs to get rested. Well, if you don't win that game on Saturday, you're playing Thursday, even if it's against the 12 or 13 seed in the 5, or it could have even been the 6 seed had Florida held on and beaten Vanderbilt. And from here on out, every game we play is for a championship, whether it's the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament. But you just would have hoped that as far as seeding in the SEC and seeding in the NCAA tournament, I mean, we're right there in the 3, 4, 5 seed conversation, that you just would have seen, I don't know, more energy or just a better start coming off of that. But you have to credit the team as far as the effort and the fight that they did bring in the second half and sticking together. Guys like Nick Pringle continuing to play better, Mark Sears doing his thing, Latrell Wrightsell doing his thing, coming back. And as you mentioned, Sam Walters, the 2 overtime games we've had against Florida and against Arkansas at home, he's just been phenomenal, and just really hope that as we get into the SEC tournament that he can really keep that positive play going and start hitting some big shots, because our 3-point shooting has really tailed off in the past couple of games. And I do think some of that has to do with Latrell Wrightsell's injury. Look, for the first 12 games of the year, obviously leading the SEC, and was shooting about 38% from the 3-point line, making about 12.5 threes per game. The defense, we were holding teams in the SEC under 80 points. And in his 5 games that he didn't play in, and I'm including the Florida game in that as well, because he did play very sparingly in that game. We were giving up almost 97 points a game. We were only hitting about 8.5 threes. I think the thing that sticks out the most about, with Wrightsell and without Wrightsell, is the fast break points. We were winning fast break points. I think we were averaging about 15 fast break points a game, and holding teams to about 8. Whereas in his absence, we didn't win a single, fast break. We didn't win a game based off fast break points. We lost in that margin against everybody we played. And then in Arkansas, we actually did win the fast break points 16-11. So that was really interesting. And then Sears playing an additional 5 minutes per game obviously was wearing him down. And Estrada and some other guys were having to play more minutes too. And it's, Brian talked about it. I think there were some articles about how efficient Wrightsell has been throughout the year. But when I look at our team, it is important to get Latrell back, but I think it's important to get Ryland back. And I think it's important for Grant Nelson to stay out of foul trouble. We've got certain guys that they need to be healthy and they need to be on the floor for us to be a good basketball team. So as excited as I am to get Latrell back and feel like this team is going to take a step forward, we need all of our guys to be healthy and rested as we go throughout this SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament as well.
And one thing I want to mention about Grant Nelson is he picked up his fourth foul with, I think, about 15 minutes to go in the second half and didn't foul out. So I don't know what, maybe it was the officiating or maybe it was, just him understanding how the officials were calling the game. But credit to Grant for being able to play their last 15. He didn't play the entire last 15 minutes, but play the last 15 minutes and overtime. So it's almost 20 minutes. I don't know how many minutes he actually got on the court, but be able to play without fouling and still be effective. Obviously, he hits I think the shot that puts Alabama within 3 with a minute to go, and then stayed out on the court and was still able to be effective in overtime that ultimately got Alabama the win. I think that's crucial, and hopefully it helps him going into the NCAA tournament. Additionally, I will say, as far as the foul shooting and just the overall officiating, as you get into postseason play, officials are a little bit more lenient with regards to fouls. They're not going to be trying to muck up the game like we've seen in a few Alabama games in the past. Mainly just Auburn and Florida. If I'm thinking of how those games kind of ended down the stretch with back and forth foul calls. You don't see that much in postseason play. Obviously, it does happen, but I don't think it's something that Alabama should be too terribly concerned about going into the NCAA tournament and the SEC tournament.
And that's something that would be a huge benefit for us, because when you look at all of our games in the SEC this year, we shot 86 less free throws than our opponents. Still only made less than 49. So we shot it at a better percentage. But it's not just, them shooting more free throws than us throughout the year. We've talked about our challenges on defense and being able to guard, but we're complicating those challenges by fouling as well with playing defense. For the first 9 games of the SEC slate, we were only giving up about 20% of our opponent's points coming from the free throw line. In the last 9 games, almost 26, 27% of their points are coming from the free throw line as well. So we're giving our teams easy shots, unguarded shots at the free throw line. And by doing that too, we're obviously getting our guys into foul trouble. That's keeping some of our players in the most efficient offense in college basketball having to be on the sidelines as well. So look, if we're not going to be a good defense, or if we're not going to guard efficiently, just don't complicate it with the foul situation. I think Grant Nelson has fouled out of 6 SEC games. That's the only games he's fouled out has been SEC games all year. But he's got to be a guy that's on the floor. And I know he's playing out of position of what we wanted him to do. And he's had to put a lot on his shoulders. And I know he wants to play physical and contest shots, but we cannot afford for him to be on the sidelines, even with Nick Pringle's positive play and how he's been leading the team as well. We need guys like that on the floor contributing on both sides, but specifically the offensive side as well.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears just a little bit, talking about the SEC tournament, I think Alabama got the probably worst draw that Alabama could have gotten, as far as Florida's being on their side of the bracket, Kentucky's being on their side of the bracket. Those are 2 very high-powered offensive teams that, if you've been watching Alabama basketball, which I assume if you're listening to this podcast, then you've watched at least some Alabama basketball games this season. Alabama struggled defensively. I think last I checked, they were ranked 102nd in KenPom on defensive efficiency. The first time that they played Kentucky, they allowed Kentucky to score 117 points. Last time that they played Florida, I think Florida scored 105 points, I believe. So for Alabama to make a run in the SEC tournament, you probably didn't want to play Florida and Kentucky, or have the potential to play Florida and Kentucky. You probably wanted to play your slower pace type of team, maybe an Auburn or a South Carolina. I think if we play Tennessee again, we probably you get a good chance of beating Tennessee. I'm not saying that they would, but you kept it within 7, and it was closer than that without Latrell Wrightsell on your home floor. Obviously, it's in Tennessee, but What are your guys' thoughts on Alabama's potential as far as going into the SEC tournament and making a potential run?
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of it revolves around who they play first. I mean, I think if Georgia's able to pull off an upset and take down Florida, I definitely like Alabama's chances of making it to the semifinal. I do think ultimately, though, if Alabama's defense can improve, I think with the way Kentucky's offense is structured and just how, just really phenomenal they've been playing since conference play. Um, I don't see Alabama necessarily going really far, which is unfortunate. But the positive thing about that, though, is that gives them more time to rest heading into the NCAA tournament, especially if let's assume that Rylan Griffin isn't still not available to come back this weekend. I think he probably will be, but if he's not and they're having to rest him, that gives, the entire team a couple more days rest and time for him to potentially get ready for the next weekend. So I think Bama can definitely win the first game. I think their road will probably end on day 2. But at the same time, I also have Florida as potentially a sleeper pick for this tournament. Florida's been playing some really good basketball, and Florida's one of those teams that, unlike other teams in the conference, Florida's one of those teams that it doesn't matter if they're playing on the road or at home. They are a really, really good team, regardless of what court they're playing on. So I really like that. I do agree with you, Christian. I think that Bama just has a really, really tough draw. It's really, when you look at the other side, there are still some good teams, and of course Tennessee, Auburn, and South Carolina's had a fantastic year. But when you just look at the level of Bama side of the bracket, it is unfortunate. But that's why we play these tournaments. Who knows? And maybe Mizzou will make a run. That's the beauty of these conference tournaments. You never really know, and you also never really know who really wants it most and who really wants that automatic qualifier heading in the next week.
Yeah, I agree that it was a tough draw, but if there's a seed that's been really good to Alabama in the history of the SEC tournament, it's been the 3 seed. Not going into when we had divisions as far as East and West, but just looking at the last 5 times that Alabama was the 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, which would have been 82, 85, 86, 90, and 91. That's 5 championship game appearances for Alabama and 3 championships from those 3 seed position as well. So hopefully I'm putting some good vibes out there that the 3 seed will be good to us this weekend. I'm also going to put out there that we haven't beaten Kentucky in the SEC tournament since 1983, so we're due. And a 3 seed has not won the SEC tournament since 2013, when Andy Kennedy and Marshall Henderson at Ole Miss beat Florida to win the SEC tournament that year. So it is a tough draw. I think it's, in a way, somewhat of a good draw for us, though, if we can keep winning, you're going to win by playing good defense. Both games against Florida and Kentucky are going to be high scoring because both of those teams are really good on the offensive side. But you're going to have to win it by getting some stops. So it's going to challenge us, in a sense, getting ready for the NCAA tournament, of having to get some stops. And it's going to be probably NCAA tournament type games, atmospheres, that's going to get you ready for the following week too, once you get into the NCAA tournament, wherever we're going to be. So no doubt it's a tough draw, Joey. I 100% agree. What is a team that could get into this and win the whole SEC tournament just with their depth and with their players? Kentucky's the hottest team in the conference. They've been playing really, really well. I think I did see something that, Drake was performing in Lexington, though. So, and Calipari, I think also, Christian, you may have tweeted this out or commented about it, kind of dismissing the SEC tournament, or at least just, our focus is on the NCAA tournament. So how focused are they going to be coming into the SEC tournament? So with anything, there's a lot of variables off the court that goes into it too. The most important thing for us, I think, is let's get the offense going again. Let's get our 3-point shots going. Let's get guys healthy. Let's get guys rested. And let's try to play defense without fouling and continue to grow as much as we can here in the last couple of weeks. And if we can get that back to, what was playing like a top 50, top 60 defense when we were playing Mississippi State at the midway point in the SEC tournament, then you gotta like our chances to make a run here in March, and especially get to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament.
And let's just hope that Drake wore a lot of Kentucky Wildcats garb while up in Lexington, so maybe some of that juju will rub off.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so weird about that because maybe someone said it or someone told me that maybe Cal had a press conference and he was like, "Oh yeah, we put the whole team. They all went to the concert and they got Rob Dillingham to come up on the stage and all of that." And I'm like, "Man, you're preparing for postseason play. Why are you? Maybe it's just different and." They're like I said, maybe they just don't care about SEC tournament, which for some people like that's totally fair. For like a storied team like Kentucky, winning the SEC tournament's not really going to do much for like their history or anything like that. I mean, it's more of like an expectation than like a celebration, if that makes sense. Um, but it's just so interesting that he's saying that 2 days before, or yeah, 2 days before the SEC tournament, when you're supposed to be trying to get your guys ready. And I know having relaxing and having breaks and stuff. I mean, that's part of it. I guarantee you, we haven't been practicing all week, right? But I just don't think that's the type of message that should be being sent to your players as far as locking in for March. Is just kind of my opinion.
Even though they've been playing better, and really, except for a half against LSU, they've definitely been the best team in the SEC. But we've all seen the reports from their own fans, their own media outlets of, is it time to move on from Calipari? So it is interesting that would be out there, that's something that they would do going into the SEC tournament. So where if it doesn't go their way, now you've got something that fans can point at as far as, well, you weren't focused. You weren't preparing them the right way. Now, look, it's 18, especially for him, it's 18, 19-year-olds that are all about to go to the NBA as well because they've got incredible talent. And that may just be how things are now as it relates to college students and, doing fun things like that. And that's what keeps your team together. But very, very interesting that he was making comments about it as well, as you mentioned, leading into the SEC tournament.
Yeah, and again, I don't remember exactly where I saw that. That might have been someone saying something that he made a comment, or I might have seen a tweet somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. But speaking on tournaments, let's just do a quick bracket update for everyone that is listening. Alabama, I think as of a few hours ago from Joe Lunardi, was projected as the 15th overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Projected to play in Spokane versus who was it? UC.
I have it right here.
UC Irvine, I believe.
As of right now, let me make sure this has been updated. This was as of this morning. I'm on the website. They had Alabama playing in Spokane with 5 seed Clemson, 12 seed Richmond, and 13 seed Vermont. He has Bama as a 4 seed.
Oh.
On the other side of that bracket in Indianapolis is number 1 Purdue, and then you have the play-in game between Norfolk State and Grambling State, and then Texas and Florida Atlantic. So that's Bama would have to beat 3 of those teams to make the Elite Eight.
If it is Vermont that we play in the first round, can we get Daniel Giddens as a special guest?
As of right now, that's who they'd play, Vermont. So
if we get Vermont, then I'll try to pull some strings to see what we can do. But for Alabama, you know how this is going to go. Everyone knows how this is going to go. Alabama's probably going to somehow find their way to play Bucky and Sanford, or McNeese State somehow is going to be a 13, or Alabama's somehow going to drop to a 5, and we're going to have to play Will Wade, or we're going to play Bucky. And then the next thing is that somehow Gonzaga is going to be the 5 seed in Alabama's region playing in Spokane. It's Alabama basketball. I think that should be the expectation. Somehow Gonzaga has convinced the NCAA tournament that they're not the host site for their own city, which is just brilliant by them. But that's how it's going to be. And Alabama's going to play an away game because that's what's going to happen. And the one year that I am down on an Alabama team in March is the year that they're somehow going to make a run. I can tell you that right now. And maybe that's a good thing. because anytime I'm negative, it turns out as a positive. Anytime I'm positive, it turns out as a negative. I'm also not allowed back in Coleman, according to multiple sources. So, but what are your guys' thoughts and potential projections for Alabama as far as getting to the NCAA tournament, making a run?
Well, if it holds, let's just hypothesize and assume that what Lenardi has here is correct. Obviously, you don't like them playing in Spokane, but if you look at the slate of teams, Vermont, I think they're a solid team, but the big team you got to look at there obviously is the 5 seed in Clemson. Moving on, Clemson obviously a team that gave Alabama some struggles earlier this year, but on the flip side of that, this is a Clemson team that really hasn't changed a lot, I don't believe, since Bama played them last, whereas Alabama has gotten a lot better. So I really like Bama's chances in a rematch on what will be a pretty much the most neutral floor you can possibly have all the way out in Washington. I really, I really like that draw. And the fact that you could potentially also play Purdue again, potentially, it'd just be a rematch after rematch for Alabama. I like the draw. I know that we would obviously much rather have them. I know you'd like to have them I know they won't be going to Charlotte, Christian, because that's way too high, or way too low for them, but wouldn't that be nice? I would like to see them play closer, but Bama fans travel, and when you look at the rest of those fan bases, they're all East Coast. So it would be an equal travel time for everybody to get out there. And there's obviously probably a good bit of Bama fans out there in Seattle that could come down. So I like that draw, but I know Charles will be able to break it down a lot better than I can.
I just think the more teams that we can play that we have not played against is going to be a benefit for us because of the tempo that we play and how efficient we have been on offense. We should have asked Greg Byrne earlier today about bracketing, since he's part of the selection committee, which if you haven't seen that interview, go check that out from earlier today. It was really good insights as far as just athletics and NIL and Alabama. So I don't know if we could really play Clemson in the second round based off of, I mean, obviously if Lenardi's putting it in there, we could, but he's also put us in there against teams in the first round that we've played. So anyway, with that, the more, like I said, the more teams that we can play that haven't played us, I think could be a little bit of a shock to the system, especially if we play well and hit shots. The problem becomes when we get into the Sweet 16, where we played Purdue this year. I don't think we'd play if Tennessee was a 1 seed, I don't think we would play them in the Sweet 16. But everybody else that's being discussed as a 1 seed, Connecticut, Houston, and North Carolina, we all played last year. So some of those players and those coaches have seen it as well. On the one side, as Alabama fans, we've been dying for great matchups and to play good competition in the non-conference. Well, even though we didn't play all those teams this year, we continue to play really good basketball programs. So a credit to Nate Oates and the staff for putting together, playing good teams. But two, obviously those are going to be good teams anyway, and there won't really be a shock to the system. But we also know too, with how crazy last year was, no 1 seeds made it to the Elite Eight, and I think only 1 2 seed made it to the Elite Eight, and that was Texas. So you just got to get in there. You got to. Hopefully we're playing the best basketball of the season, not only on the offensive side, but the defensive side as well. And just let March Madness take care of itself and see where the chips fall. And hopefully you get to continue to play a couple mid-majors or low majors, because we've obviously had a lot of success against them this year and have been able to overwhelm them with our pace and with our ability just to continuously score baskets, even if we're giving up baskets here and there. So just excited to see where we're eventually going to fall. It'd be really interesting to see where, based off of, if we lose to Florida or whoever in the first round of the SEC tournament, do we drop to a 5 seed? If we make it all the way to the SEC championship or win the SEC championship, do we jump all the way to the 3 seed? Just how that's all going to play out, and the teams around that as well. Like a Kentucky, if we're the one who beats them, like Kansas, who I think is dealing with some players being out as they go into the Big 12 tournament, and just the typical things, the movement back and forth that you have in this particular week. But It's obviously, I'm sure, just like y'all, one of my favorite times of the year, just to sit back and watch really good basketball and be entertained by teams across the country and just the excitement around it. So looking forward to it, but hopefully we're going to be a key part of that conversation here over the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, and I talked to Delphi Brackets. I don't know if you guys saw that interview, but I went on their podcast and they just wanted to talk about Alabama basketball and like the fandom. But I went back and forth with them in DMs and just asking about the seeding. Alabama, according to them, at least as of Saturday or Sunday, I believe, I can't remember when I talked to them, is on the 4 line right now. I lost to Florida doesn't do anything as far as their resume, as far as Alabama's resume is concerned. You might be the last 4 seed. They have us as the 14th, I think, overall seed. And I trust them a lot more than I trust Joe Lunardi, who's on average outside the top 100 as far as bracketologists are concerned. There's only like 200 so bracketologists. He's a great tool for fans to kind of get a general guideline of where their teams are. I do believe that he was the first person to put Alabama as a 4 seed, and that was prior to the Kentucky game. And then after the Kentucky game, almost every single bracketologist dropped us to a 4. So he does kind of move the market as far as like that type of movement. But as far as when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I'm not so much trusting exactly what he's putting out there. But with a win versus Kentucky, I was told that that would go a very, very long way as far as seeding is concerned. Main reason is if Kentucky loses, then that's a team that you're directly competing for a seed line. And it's a real way to show some movement along that line. They told me that Alabama can move up to a 3 seed if they beat Kentucky. Obviously, it depends on how the dominoes kind of fall. But it would go a long way to beat Kentucky. Obviously, now with Kansas having the injuries to Dickinson and McClure, that I think that's how you say his name. Again, terrible pronunciation. So with those 2 guys, it also comes into question kind of where Kansas is going to fall on that line. Now, there is a potential because Kansas was projected as a 3 seed. If they lose early in the Big 12, they can move to a 4. Does that push Alabama back? Does Alabama jump them? It's all subjective and a lot of movement. That's why these conference tournaments are so important. And I know some people do have conversations about whether or not that is an important thing. I think one thing to mention about that is we were talking with Greg, and your total resume matters, right? It's not, oh, what have you done for me in the last 2 weeks? They're looking at games in January. They're looking at games in November. Obviously, they use those types of recent success to be able to determine, okay, where is a team right now, especially with the team dealing with injuries and things like that. But it's a whole resume body of work. And that's why, for the most part, you don't see much movement in conference tournaments. But when you're comparing teams that are so close with Kentucky, Kansas, Alabama, things like that, Auburn as well, winning and getting those quad 1 opportunities, which is where Alabama is kind of eluded Alabama. They've been kind of unfortunate because all of their big time opponents have either been top 10, top 15 net opponents, or they've been borderline quad 1 teams. Mississippi State, Florida, Ole Miss, Indiana State's right on the cut line for a Q1. Like those teams are, a ball bounces a certain way. Alabama's looking at 500 in quad 1. So it'll be interesting to see how it shapes out. Hopefully Alabama gets some lucky bounces, which they haven't gotten this year.
Speaking of Indiana State, you want to give a prediction in or out before Selection Sunday without knowing what bids are going to be stolen?
I mean, Indiana State is one of those teams. They're 29th in the net. And I know the net's not a ranking tool, it's a sorting tool. But if you have a team that's 29th in the net, like, you're saying that they're one of the top 30 teams in the country.
They're a Q1 opponent, no matter where you play them for anybody.
Exactly. And I understand maybe their strength schedule isn't great and they didn't win their tournament, but those are one of the teams where, like, I understand the strength of schedule argument. I get it because, you know, we're on the flip side of that, where Alabama's played the toughest strength schedule in the country as far as like offense is concerned, maybe the toughest strength schedule overall. Played the second hardest SEC tournament or SEC schedule, like, and we're sitting here with 10 losses, and you're like, hey, like, we played a tough schedule, you shouldn't hurt us for it. But on the flip side, like you said, if they're a quad one team, regardless of where they are playing, then they should be in the tournament. There shouldn't be a question about whether or not they should be in the tournament. And they have the, what's his name? I don't know his actual name, but the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is what they call him.
Yeah.
They have the player and the storyline to make a March story. And they're gonna have TV viewership just because of that guy. And it's one of those teams where I think you put them in just because of their whole body of work.
Put them in against Michigan State in the play-in game. Get some eyeballs on the play-in games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention J&J, our apparel sponsor. Go shop J&J Apparel. We have some stuff coming out this off season, and maybe we will have some tournament swag coming out if Alabama decides that they're going to make a run and put everything together. But keep on the lookout for that. In addition, obviously, we're presented by the Field of 68. Just so thankful for them to have us on this podcast network and allowing us to do the things we have, like the Greg Byrne interview that we just did covering College Game Day, getting more eyeballs on at this Alabama basketball program, which is most deserved, I believe. But if you haven't checked out that Greg Byrne interview, then go check it out. Greg, I'm so thankful for him to take the time out of his day to talk to us, especially because he's going to DC and then going to Indianapolis directly after for the bracket committee. But as far as our schedule is concerned for the rest of the week and getting in the NCAA tournament play, I haven't talked to the guys about it, but we may do a SEC tournament preview space just so people can get their thoughts out. But we're not going to be doing spaces during the SEC tournament unless we lose. Main reason for that is, one, I don't want to be on a space every single night if we get to the championship from Friday to Sunday, talking about Alabama basketball when we can just lump sum everything together into one. And then two, I really don't think it's that beneficial. I do know people like to talk about the game immediately after, but I think everyone can hold their thoughts until we have like a recap space, which is beneficial for me. It's beneficial for my wife. It's beneficial for these guys' wives, where we're not going to be sitting here, you know, at right now it's 11:16 my time, so 10:16 there, talking about Alabama basketball, which we love to do, but sometimes it is good to have a little bit of a break. But additionally, on Sunday, we're going to do like a season recap type space with leading into the bracket reveal on Sunday night. I think that starts at 6 Eastern. So we're going to start that 30 minutes before the bracket reveal, just so we can get all of our thoughts out and then to kind of do like a live react of the bracket. And then next week we have Evan Maya coming on to talk about he does statistics and analytics for all of college basketball, but we thought it'd be very beneficial for us to kind of get like a rundown of, he does even bracket simulations, right? And get a rundown as where does he think Alabama's going to be? So, and how they're going to perform in the NCAA tournament. But other than that, if you guys don't have anything else, I think we're good to call it a night or a day when this comes out. And we'll talk again either Thursday or after Alabama wins or lose the SEC tournament. But with that, roll Tide.
Roll Tide.